mocking, and name calling, verbal humiliation in front of other friends. And so sometimes kids might make up nicknames for each other, and that could be always something to check out. Are you comfortable with that nickname, or is that something that you allow them to call you? And sometimes that's just one form where it might just start. Social and relational bullying, and that would be gossiping, public humiliation, embarrassment, rumor spreading, alienation, exclusion from groups, and setting one another up to take the blame for something. And so again, that can happen at all different levels. And so this presentation even can relate to adults also. Okay, so I look at this right now, and there was a lot of bullying going on of this potential governor of Missouri. I mean, that guy was probably in his 60s. So this can happen at every level. The worst, and it gets worse as we go down, are the cyber and electronic bullying, which that can happen over the internet. And so there's many ways that people can do this, and that's why there is a new law coming into effect in the state of Michigan around cyberbullying. I know Grand Rapids Public, I think they were looking at their law, and in the first bully law that came about, Matt Safe School Law, about a year and a half ago, they had put in there things about cyberbullying. So everybody has to have themselves covered. Social and relational bullying are experienced the most often. So in addition, there's more signs, and this could be a student that has unexplainable injuries, lost or destroyed clothing, books, electronic things, just things that might be special to them, and they might come up and tell you that this thing was stolen, and don't jump to the conclusion to think, oh, you're just misplacing it again, because there always can be an investigation behind it where somebody is trying to mess with their head. Frequent headaches and stomach aches, that goes hand in hand with depression and anxiety. So if someone is coming to school every day, not wanting to be here right at the beginning of the day, it could have something to do with something that's going on. Changes in their eating habits, and again, kids could go home hungry. I mean, if you get a phone call from a parent that says, why is my kid hungry every day? There could be bullying going on at lunchtime where somebody could be spitting in someone's lunch, messing with their lunch, pouring milk into their lunch, just taking odd things and throwing it in, and that child might be fearful of telling anybody what's going on. Difficulty sleeping or frequent nightmares, and we know that we all don't go under solid sleep every night, and there is a point where you're in your sleep pattern and where you wake up and you can't get back to sleep. So if kids are coming to school exhausted and tired, it could mean that they're not getting enough sleep due to anxiety. Declining grades, loss of interest in their school, sudden loss of friends and avoiding situations, feelings of helplessness, decreased self-esteem, and ultimately we know that the worst part about it would be self-destructive behaviors, running away, harming themselves, or talking about suicide. And so we can't rule out that kids here at your school, children in general, are at risk to think about killing themselves and actually be impulsive enough to take their lives. So again, we know that children and youth who are bullied are more likely than other children to be depressed, anxious, lonely, and have low self-esteem, feel unwell, and think about suicide, because it has a direct impact on your mental health, which is how you think, how you act, and how you feel. A victim of bullying is twice as likely to take his or her own life compared to someone who is not a victim. So, like I said, it has an effect on how someone's thinking. So how we're treated every day can have an effect on how someone is thinking. They could be thinking that they have low self-esteem, so their thoughts would be, I'm not worth it, I hate myself, I hate my life, nobody likes me. And sometimes we tend to, oh, everything's gonna be okay, and these kind of things need to be taken serious when kids talk about those kind of things. Because as we know, kids can be super impulsive and actually act on something. They could be paranoia. That sounds kind of scary, but paranoia can just be that people are plotting against me. There's a whole bunch of them when there's just one. They're thinking that everybody is out to get them. Thoughts of suicide, thoughts of hopelessness, feelings of being misunderstood. And if you, again, in the movie Bully, it just gives some great examples of where kids are not listened to. And just this assumption that kids can get along with each other. And that's not always gonna be necessarily it, to have kids make up with each other. And again, not feeling listened to. And then it has an effect on how they act, so think and act so far. And so kids might be acting angry and aggressive. And so a lot of it is that old-fashioned poster. I don't know if y'all have ever seen this, but it's of all these faces of what's behind your anger, and it could be sadness, it could be tears, it could be being mean back. But again, anger is not always the best way to handle any situation, and so that takes a lot of finding out what's going on behind it. And so for some reason, post-puberty, after puberty, boys tend to show all of their emotions and their frustration through anger, and girls continue to show theirs through tears and sadness. So we need to watch the boys that are angry. They might be unreasonable, isolative, they might bully others, they might not want to go to school, and then ultimately, I get so sad when kids don't care about anything. Oh, that doesn't bother me. And what we know is that, you know, your school environment, that could be the best 8 hours of someone's day. And so when kids get to that point, because it is kind of fun on the first day of school, how everybody's so excited to be back, and then what happens to a child when all of a sudden they act like they really don't care about it. It doesn't bother me. And then how they feel. So we know that how we treat people can have an effect on how they feel, and so it could be the embarrassment and humiliation and sadness and fearful and ultimately physically sick too, and lonely, and again, anger. And so ultimately what that is how we get right into this, and we need to start talking about mental health. And so when can we begin to recognize if it's actually how this child is being treated is ultimately having an effect on their mental health, where it becomes a mental health disorder? I think some of you are going to be coming to mental health first aid, right?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who are going to come to that course, it's really awesome, and you get a certification. But we really go further into depth about anxiety, depression, and how to recognize it even more. This is kind of just an overlay right now. So again, what is depression? And we know that it is a biological illness. And so we tend not to treat it as a biological illness because a lot of times you can't see that somebody is actually depressed. The only time you really can find out is by observing, seeing their behaviors, and then also, so watching how they're acting and seeing how they feel, and then what are they thinking. So a lot of it takes asking questions. And so we know that when there's a brain left untreated, somebody can actually have a depletion of some really important chemicals in their brain, and that's where we need to get somebody some help. And so kids that are bullied aren't automatically going to be depressed, but there's a lot of risk factors that go hand in hand with having an illness called depression. So we know that depression, and there's the word depression, which, you know, we can use loosely, and, you know, but when does it become more than that, more than just sadness? And so if there's a marked change in someone's behavior for 2 weeks or longer, that could lead us to the possibility that that person has what is called depression. And so we know that there's an emotional component that goes along with depression, and those would be on my right-hand side. So the depressed moods, low self-esteem, impaired memory, left side, anxiety. And so we can't dismiss what anxiety really is. And anxiety, the median age of onset for anxiety disorder, does anybody want to take a guess? So you take youngest to the oldest, okay? Where would it meet in the middle? Anybody have a guess? It's 11 years old. And so for kids, we can't dismiss the kids that might have, you know, the drop-off syndrome, where mom, dad drops them off, whatever, or they get off their bus, however they get to school, and every day they're crying. That could be a form of mild anxiety. We can't dismiss it, because those things left untreated, okay, can lead to even more serious mental health disorders. So a lot of times, people that are depressed as adults had anxiety as kids. The median age of onset for depression, does anybody want to guess on that one?
15.
Good guess, 32. Okay? So that's why we can't dismiss depression in older adults. Okay, so you even can get depression when you're 90. I mean, there's a lot of complex things that go along with it. It could be that somebody's terminally ill, somebody has lost their spouse. So the median age of onset for depression is 32. So we know that anxiety is a huge component. So someone who has anxiety could be at risk to, at some point, have clinical depression. Again, emotions, not finding pleasure in things that you always do, feeling guilty, crying a lot for no particular reason. The guilt could be that you're bringing everybody else down. I feel terrible. I'm just, I'm not a good person. I'm not a good enough spouse. I'm not a good enough mom, dad. Easily angered and irritated, and racing thoughts, hearing voices or seeing images. Okay, those bottom three really are things that come when somebody is quite ill. And that doesn't happen at the beginning of a mental health disorder. That's what's scary about it is that if I flip back a few slides, when somebody's brain is sick for quite a long time, like it was on that slide, you can begin to actually think that people are plotting to get you. And you can actually have thoughts of wanting to harm other people. And then you mix in possibly someone substance abusing, so adding in drugs and alcohol, then they're really not going to think right. So that young boy in East Kentwood, and I use him as an example sometimes, and he was a little kid, right? And he murdered this friend of his on the playground. Well, when they questioned him, he had wanted to die. He had wanted to kill himself. So he had thoughts of wanting him to harm himself. And who knows at that time if he thought that other little boy was plotting to get him. So he had to protect himself. But the thing is that we know that with a mental illness, your brain can get quite sick where you are not thinking right. So everything that goes up in the media when they bring attention to mental health disorders, that is when they are in quite far into this illness. So it's kind of like if we talk about physical health conditions, right? And someone who has seizures every day, right? Okay, that could be because they're far into their illness of epilepsy and not getting treatment. But we would never focus on that part of that person's illness, okay? Whereas mental health and mental illnesses, we tend to focus on those horrible things that can come later, rather than some amazing stories that are out there of people that are in recovery from mental health disorders. And then again, on that physical side, really super serious, because a lot of times, and especially with kids, that's where the concern from the parents might be. I had to really focus on my kid's physical health, and I'll get them to the doctor for that, when maybe what's going on behind it is a mental health component.
Christy?
Yeah.
Could mental health in teenagers look different than, if you had an adult person
Oh,
that
yeah.
didn't want to change goals or
Yes.
it was just so somber all the
Yes.
time, would that look different?
Sure it can, because a lot,
Teenagers?
it's so hard, really, with kids, right, to tell what's normal and what's not normal. And that's where, with this mental health first aid class, I'd love for you to be in there, that's where we teach you how to ask more questions behind that, and how you start a conversation up with a teenager. Hi, I've noticed this in you. And we never can be too careful, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's where, like, even just the stuff, an overview, right? And you start to think about kids that become less unkempt and they don't take care of themselves. Hey, are you okay? I've noticed that you're not taking care of yourself lately. You usually always wear your hair back, and the amount of things that you can get out of a person.
Could it also be masked by anger?
Oh, big time. Huge. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, right now we're looking at everything that's come out about the NFL, all these athletes, right, that have gone on to abuse their spouses. Well, I mean, seriously, that didn't start as an adult. That started as kids, and that was the way that they were able to handle their anger. And seriously, they needed counseling. and what maybe was environmental, where they were brought up in an environment like that, as adults,